Good afternoon, ladies and gents. It's the 15th of August 2024, and this is going to be a brief discussion about the threat between Israel and Hezbollah and also other countries in that region. Again, as normal with these foundation videos, I'm just going to throw up some slides, just to keep the just to keep the screen active, shall we say. Guys, this is what this channel is going to be about. I have published the foundations of this channel with a channel introduction, a playlist, which consists of about 15, 16, 17 videos. Ideally, if you get time, I would recommend that you watch these videos, but strongly suggest that you watch them in order. I think I may have mentioned this on other videos. So when I say in order, from video 1 through to video 16 sequentially, where we merely sort of just lay down some of the facts and foundations. But the reason why they need to be watched in order is because they've been sort of created and published logically. So it's logical. It's a logical foundation, should we say, and that it should be viewed in order. Right, enough of all that, guys. For any of you that follow similar channels and sort of various news on other platforms out there, you're going to know that it's likely or possibly all going to pop off in the Middle East soon. This is not a new front or theatre. They've been fighting wars across the Middle East for 2,000 plus years. There are battles in the Middle East mentioned in the book of Genesis of the Bible. So, this is not new. And this is not a religious channel either. So let's just get down to business. A quick recap for any of you that has no idea, I suppose, as to why it's likely to spark off or sparks are likely to fly in the Middle East over the coming weeks. Most of this will stem from the Hamas attack on Israel in October of 2023, whereby approximately 1,200 Jews were killed when Hamas crossed the border from the Gaza Strip into Israel. Since then, Israel have carried out hundreds of operations in Gaza with the intent to eliminate Hamas. And if you don't know who Hamas are, they're a Palestinian militant group, but viewed by many others as being, a foreign terrorist organization. Another front that has opened up as a result of the Hamas invasion or attack, whatever you want to call it, is with Hezbollah, another terrorist organization based in the southern part of Lebanon. They now want some action. Their cause will be due to what has been said or seen as Israel's overpowering reaction to the Hamas attack, whereby thousands or tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed. But honestly, Hezbollah, they don't need a reason to hate the Jews. In fact, none of the people in those neighboring countries to Israel need too many reasons to. This is how I see it. Israel are located in a very vulnerable and volatile place, as they're surrounded by 6 or 7 Muslim states. And of course, Israel aren't Muslim. My guess is that those Islamic states, they don't want Israel there, especially when, they're being sort of seen to be obliterating the Palestinians, or they have close ties to the West and their Zionist ways and beliefs, and the list could go on. Those are, I'm sure there's a lot more reasons. But there's a lot of history to the region with religion, war and conflict, the political views and influences over the thousands of years, which we won't be covering in this session today. A quick disclaimer though, guys, before I get myself into any trouble. When using the term terrorist organization, this term is deemed so by governments across the globe, and it may proscribe an organization if they believe it is concerned in terrorism, and it is proportionate to do. This means that the organization commits or participates in, I suppose, acts of terrorism, prepares for terrorism, promotes or encourages terrorism, including the unlawful glorification of terrorism, or is otherwise concerned in terrorism. Terrorism, when defined, means the involvement of serious violence against a person, involves serious damage to property, endangers a person's life other than that of the person committing the act, creates a serious risk to the health or safety of the public or section of the public, or is designed seriously to interfere with or seriously to disrupt another's life and community. The use or threat of such action must be designed to influence the government or an international governmental organization or to intimidate the public or a section of the public and must be undertaken for the purpose of advancing a political, religious, racial, or ideological cause. Finally, the numbers of such organizations mentioned here are open to debate. And these numbers I've just pulled from various sources, guys, of which all present different results. So when I say numbers, I'm going to mention, I'm going to tell you or provide you with an overview of these terrorist organizations. And I'm going to present to you estimated member numbers, how many members are, present in those organizations. But they're just estimates, guys. So that's all I wanted to sort of say. So what is Israel up against in that region? Again, guys, I don't want to go into the politics nor religion. Long story short, this war, amongst others, will be for one or more reasons, and normally the root cause to most wars and conflicts across the planet. So, for me, religion in the Middle East will be a factor. There will be a direct clash between Islam and Judaism. There's actually clashes within some of those nation countries in terms of their own governments clashing with those terrorist organizations, causing internal tensions and all the rest of it. This can be over faith, the way the country is being run, also law and beliefs, and all the rest of that bollocks. But nevertheless, religion will be a number one cause to why people will end up taking up arms, all in the name of God, and off it goes from there. Then you have territory. And the main reason for the fight over land will be the minerals in the ground, because with that comes wealth, and with wealth comes power. Let's start with the direct and more, let's say, immediate threat. That being, this is a threat to Israel, that being Hezbollah. So formed in 1982 in response to Israel's invasion of Lebanon. They are a Lebanese-based Shia terrorist group. Since 1992, Hezbollah have participated in Lebanese government with an estimated 20,000 following trained fighters. Although the main battles between Hamas and Israel have dwindled somewhat, Hamas cannot be forgotten about. Hamas was formed again in the 80s, back in 1987, and at the beginning of the first Palestinian uprising. Hamas is a fundamentalist Sunni Muslim terrorist organization founded in Gaza in 1987 by members of the Muslim Brotherhood. There were four key leaders up until just a few months ago, as two of those have now been assassinated. There were around 30,000 fighters before they invaded Israel. That number will now be down to approximately 20,000. Again, these are all approximate because the Israelis, say that they've killed or eliminated at least 10,000 Hamas members. Moving southwards from Israel into Yemen, there are a couple of groups I just want to mention here. The one in the public eye at the moment is going to be the Houthis, who are responsible for attacking numerous sort of shipping vessels around the coast of Yemen and have since been designated as a specially designated global terrorist group. They're also a Sunni Islamist party with links to the Muslim Brotherhood again, and are said to be an Iranian proxy with a larger following of around 120,000 trained fighters. Then in the same region, we also have the presence of Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. These are Sunni extremists based in Yemen that are orchestrating, or they've orchestrated actually, numerous sort of high-profile terrorist attacks over the years. Moving eastwards into Syria, there are many militant and terrorist organizations, but a more prominent group of the Al-Nusra Front, being one of the most capable Al Qaeda affiliated groups operating in Syria. Although there hasn't been too much of a mention regarding Iraq's presence and their stance on the conflict in Israel. It wasn't too long ago when they did make headline news with the Islamic State, or ISIS as we know them, of Iraq, making itself, known around the world. An extreme terrorist organization still present in pockets across the Middle East and around the world. This lot cannot be discarded because they would have an invested interest in attacking the Jews. So the problem here for Israel is that they're completely surrounded by Islamic countries, all of which breed terrorist groups and organizations, and active groups located in all of those countries surrounding Israel. So I would, sort of, I would say that this is still a fight against terrorism in some shape or form. There's always underlying issues. There's always political issues. There's always, the business issues and whatever. We're never going to know about that, but we'll see. For me, religion. And there are more concerning aspect is the likelihood of such organizations having access to and the use of nuclear weapons. So that's the terrorist organizations I'm talking about. So this is a big concern for the West. So why is it all about to pop off? Or why is it possibly going to kick off in the Middle East? Well, just over the last few months, there's been the assassination of a couple of influential figures tied to the Middle East. The assassination of Salah Mohammed Solomon Al-Awi on the 2nd of January 2024. He was a Palestinian political and senior leader of Hamas and a founder, commander of its military wing, who was he was taken out by an airstrike on his residence. Then there was the death of President Ibrahim Rashi following it was a helicopter crash, which he was traveling in, which was said to have been flying during sort of adverse weather conditions, blah 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 blah. Then there was just a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago now. How time flies. There was the assassination of the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was he was taken out whilst he was sat in a hotel room with his bodyguards by a short-range projectile fired from outside his guest house in Iran's capital, Tehran. But there were also reports that there's possibly, there could possibly be have been a bomb planted in those residents up to a couple of months before that. But we're never really going to know what happened there, guys. And out of those three, although the Iranian president passed during the helicopter crash, there's plenty of speculation on how and why that helicopter crashed in the first place, or was even flying in adverse weather conditions in the first place. Right, so there's the foundation. Simply put, Israel's neighbours are not happy about the leadership being sort of picked off one by one, and with that, they're going to be retaliating, or they say they're going to be retaliating. And also, guys, we have to be aware and concerned, even with the Middle East, certainly for many in the West, being thousands of miles away. I cannot emphasize enough on how, we in the West do not, we don't have to have bombs dropping on our streets for us to be sort of impacted here. Anytime there is a conflict in the Middle East, especially on the scale that we've never seen before, this will cause a shortage in the world supply of oil. Supply goes down, but the demand doesn't, and therefore the prices will inflate. When I talk about a war in the Middle East like never seen before, I mean in our lifetimes on a sort of on a large scale for the following reasons. When you look at the geography of the region, you can see that Israel it isn't a particularly large country. However, it does have a highly sophisticated military, heavily backed by the West. We can see all of these Islamic states surrounding Israel, and there could be attacks on multiple fronts here, which could include Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, and of course Iran. Only this week, was it? Or it might have been, where are we? Anyway, over the last week, we had Russia's security official, it was Shoigu, in Iran, having talks regarding the tensions in the Middle East. And we don't know what was discussed, but we can only speculate. What we do know is that Russia will be offering to help and support Iran in some way, shape, or form. Now, we know that Russia are, we know what they're all about. and what threat they present to the NATO alliance, no matter what Russia can and will offer in terms of support. The concern is that Russia are now publicly involved. On top of that, today, was it today or yesterday or whenever it was, Iran and Yemen have threatened some of their neighbors, that being Saudi Arabia and Oman, that if they allow Israeli and other sort of Western parties to use their airspace when launching attacks against Iran and Yemen, then they will become targets themselves. So the types of targets being threatened here by Yemen certainly are going to be the oil fields in Saudi Arabia. And we know what will happen with that lot if that's all lit up. The cost of oil will fly, and there will be a mad rushes at all of your petrol stations across the planet. If there are viewers out there that cannot see what is happening here, then just stick with me and let me try and explain. Now, let me tell you what I think is happening here. As I sort of try and completely summarize this, the West are never going to be invading any of the countries in the Middle East. However, what they will do is to try and maintain as many of those secure business relationships as possible with the likes of the UAE, Oman, and Saudi Arabia for those oil and other minerals. With that, the West will want to be protecting those assets. And with that, we'll have to assume that if Yemen and Iran target, let's say, Saudi and Oman, then that is exactly what the West will do. They'll protect those assets. I think this is still a fight again. I've mentioned it already in this session that this is a fight against terrorism because there's absolutely one thing that the West will never allow to happen, and that is for nuclear weapons to be in the palms of the terrorist. Once that happens, guys, we've got a big problem. Moving on to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other militants in that area. Just to say that they're all backed and funded by Iran. And Iran is on the cuff of having developed its own nuclear weapons. That cannot be allowed to happen, ladies and gents, no matter what. And the West will do whatever it takes to make sure that they're disarmed. The West have always had an eye on Iran since the Iraq War and probably way before that as well. So the war against Iran will happen because it has to. If it doesn't, then we're going to have some really big issues, not in the too distant future. Another thing that cannot be allowed to happen here, also, guys, is for Israel to be taken out or taken down, be invaded, because right now they could be fully surrounded on their eastern flank. That is a situation the West cannot allow to happen either. So when this all pops off, it could get very messy from the off, to be honest with you. Military assets are being moved into the area, both in the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, the Mediterranean, and on land across the theatre. I think that what could happen here is that Israel are definitely in danger of being overrun. And I think that I've got to be careful when I say this. What the West sort of want to happen, it's not the West want this to happen. Right, I'm not going to say that. Okay, so I'll get myself into trouble. Let's just forget about that. What does concern me though is how will the West react? So when this happens, if it happens, um, what will the West's reaction be? Um, it- Before that, though, there's going to be other concerns, and it's going to be Israel's reaction. Honestly, I think personally, and I'm only saying this because it's something that's been mentioned over the last 6 months at least. But honestly, I think the use of an EMP is on the cards here in that region. But I'm just not sure on who or where, which is it's kind of difficult if there are attacks on all sort of or on multiple fronts surrounding Israel. So what I'm trying to say is if you're getting attacked by multiple fronts by multiple countries or organizations, then who are you going to attack first? Are you going to attack them all? You're going to attack one or two. It's going to be hard to, lock it down as such. Another important factor, guys, to mention here, and this is important, this is very important for you guys to understand, certainly when we're talking about Israel being surrounded and possibly hit from all sides. Israel have what they call the Samson option, which is Israel's its deterrence strategy of massive retaliation with nuclear weapons as a last resort against a country whose military has invaded and or destroyed much of Israel. So what this means is that if Israel at any point feel as though the country has been destroyed, invaded, or taken over, then they will use nuclear weapons to defend itself, of course. I'm actually not sure what part of that message the likes of Yemen, Syria, Iran, Lebanon, and others are not understanding. And that's before the West even get involved. So how could this all pan out? I don't know. I'm just not sure Jordan would get involved in this. Of course, they're going to have militants in Jordan, but I don't see Jordan wanting to get too involved. Yemen, on the other hand, are already involved, and the West are already sort of taking out targets in Yemen, or the Houthis, should we say. They've caused all sorts of shit on the global shipping lanes, and that impacts trade. So they will get some of this. Lebanon, as you already know, are involved. Hezbollah are just about to sort of go out, or go sort of all out war against Israel over the next few weeks, maybe. And Syria will be providing routes for military assets to reach the Israeli border. One thing to bear in mind with Syria is that there are Russian military bases there as well. Putting that lot aside, is there a likelihood that Russia and even China could come to Iran's aid? If that happens, then all bets are off, guys. And you better make sure that you're prepared. I can't say it. I was going to swear them. That was the pause. I'm going to try and refrain from the swearing, but I'm going to say it. Just make sure you're the fuck prepared, really. I think if Israel end up on the back foot, they could use a tactical nuke or an EMP against its neighbours. The Strait of Hormuz would likely be shut completely. With that, the price of oil will explode and global economies could really plunge into sort of recession. Let's not forget, guys, whilst this is all bubbling away, we still have the conflict in Europe, which off the back of the Middle East theatre or the Eastern theatre could cause the European conflict to spill over into NATO countries. We've seen a turn of events only this week, actually, and last week, whereby Ukraine have crossed the Russian border and they've made significant gains and they're starting to sort of take Russian towns and, they're digging in and everything else. Something I would not have expected to happen. But then why not? Ukraine is being invaded and in war. This is what it's all about. But if the Ukraine and Russian war spills over into Europe at the same time as this lot in the Middle East, then God knows where we're going to be going, man. Because it's going to be chaos. Personally, whilst the frontline battles sort of take place on the eastern front in Ukraine, it is going to be difficult for others to, be drawn into the mix. There is nothing better than Putin wanting, I suppose, some other sort of support from other countries, meaning that with Ukraine now taking the initiative, they're doing so by going west, actually, along the border towards Belarus. Now, I can see Belarus being triggered to help support Russia as the conflict edges closer to the Belarusian border. When that happens, then Poland are in, and there you have it. The war has spilled over into Europe. So there are so many, you know, there are so many knife edges here. So many things that can happen for this to, because once it goes, it goes. That's it. It's all bets are off. We're off. But everyone's on edge, and we're all kind of sat here waiting and thinking, well, it only takes this to happen. And when you start seeing the Ukrainians going over the Russian border and it's, further west towards Belarus, is that Is that likely to ignite Belarus or Belarusian military, shall we say? Who knows? Because once that happens, then Poland is straight in, and then that's it. We've got it all going off. So that's what I'm saying to you guys. It's just so fragile around the world at the moment that you just cannot be seen to be ignoring any of this. I know for many people out there, the sheep, NPCs, normalcy biases, you will not acknowledge any of this until it's too late. If you are a sheep, then you won't be bothered anyway, because you'll be relying on the government to wipe your asses and spoon feed you and whatever. If you're the NPCs or normalcy bias crew, well, you'll simply continue sort of going through life with those bubbles on your head, simply refusing to accept that anything bad is going to happen to you and your family, and that's it. You simply won't understand that when it pops off in the Middle East, you could find yourself joining very long queues at petrol stations, waiting to fill up your tanks. That is only if you can afford the hiked up fuel prices, or worse still, the rationing of petrol, last seen in 1973, actually, and before that, during World War II. In 1973, there were oil shortages presenting it was an energy crisis here in the UK. It wasn't just UK, it was everywhere else, but I'm just going to talk about the UK. And what caused that crisis? Well, listen to this. Back in 1970, when I say listen to this, listen to why this happened and see if you can marry this up to what's happening today. Back in 1970, the Yom Kippur War between Israel and a number of states in the Middle East. Okay, so back in 1970, there was a war between Israel and a number of states in the Middle East, which erupted on the 6th of October, 1973. The Arab members of the Organization of Oil Exports Countries, or OPEC, implemented an oil embargo on the 17th of October 1973, initially applying just to the United States, but quickly expanded to Western European countries and Japan because of the perceived sort of support which those countries were giving Israel. So let's just let's just let's just recap what I've just said there. This was conflict between Israel and other Middle Eastern states. Okay, I've been saying that if this pops off and there are numerous Middle Eastern states getting involved, they could lock down their oil supply, they could light up the oil fields, whatever they do, they're going to disrupt trade. And when we're talking about oil, it impacts so much. Okay. So it happened 1970, 1973. That wasn't long ago, guys. Okay. And the same is happening today. So, I just wanted to point that out. Okay, history is valuable. I hated history when I was at school. I didn't see the point. But over the last 2.5 years, since I've been tracking all of this, it's so important to pick up on stuff that's happened back in the past. So as I finish off this discussion, just think about this, guys. Most households in the UK have at least two vehicles sat on their drives. Many households have more, actually. That mode of transport is relied on heavily for you guys to get to work, to go shopping, to see your friends and family, if in an emergency, or just to sort of, go about your daily business. If that mode of transport stops for you, what impact will that have on you and those around you? Okay, I'm putting that out to you now, guys. Whilst you're sat there, if you're still if you're still awake or you're still with me, if all of a sudden you've got no petrol, okay, we have had it where, there's been sort of shortages and stuff like that and all the rest of it and panic buyers and all the rest of it. But if you've got a shortage on a scale whereby you have to be rationed or petrol has to be rationed, how will that impact you? I mean, just think about work, for instance. If you rely heavily on your car to get to work and all of a sudden you can't get to work and it's a job where you can't work remotely from home, how does that impact you? Well, that impacts you financially, okay? Um, if you rely on your car for, many other reasons, what I'm trying to say is it's not until it's gone do you realize, how important that commodity or whatever it is to you. Okay, so all I'm just trying to say, guys, is that, we don't have to have bombs or missiles or anything landing in our gardens here in the UK. It could pop off in the Middle East and we could be fucked over here. is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that's the bottom line. Okay, we could be impacted by it. How about sort of like I was saying to you, how about sort of getting to work? If you've got family members that you have to support, when I say support, you might have sort of parents that need looking after, or you need to be transporting them or giving them lifts to hospital or whatever. What I'm trying to say is, for those of you that rely on cars, you're going to know the impact. And it's no good people sitting there saying, well, I can use public transport, buses and taxis and all the rest of it. Don't you think that they run on the same fuel that your cars do? EVs or electric cars will be king during this kind of crisis, up until the cost of electricity goes up. Remember, power stations also rely on oil. Anyway, enough of that. That's enough for me for one day. Sorry to sort of babble on, guys. This might not be important to many of you. I'm just trying to sort of highlight. I'm trying to educate some of you actually. This is all information that I've educated myself with. It's valuable. It gives me an understanding of what's going on. But more importantly, is there a likelihood or possibility that if those conflicts kick off, am I going to be impacted here? Well, me and my family. And the answer to those questions, or that question, is yes. So as a prepper, we need to make sure we're prepared. Okay. As soon as I have some news, guys, on updates on any of the conflicts across the world, then I'll be sure to be keeping you informed. Again, like I say, these are just foundational videos. They're kind of ones that sit in an archive and you kind of jump into them if you're bored, really. But it's important to understand this information. Guys, that's it from me. Just make sure that you keep yourselves military fit and infantry wear, and I'll catch up with you soon.